The ship Harmony's Edge moved slowly through the dark space between stars. Inside the main cabin, Ambassador Ji-hoon Park looked out at the distant lights. After 6 months of travel, they were finally close to their goal. This was humanity's first real chance to make friends with another smart species in the galaxy. Ji-hoon touched the glass window with his hand. He had spent 3 years learning about the Vilthani Empire. These aliens controlled 17 different star systems. They were much older than humans and had technology that Earth could only dream about. If humanity could make a deal with them, it would change everything. "Sir, we will arrive in 2 hours," said Minji Kim, walking into the room. She was young, but very smart. Ji-hoon had picked her as his helper because she could think fast and stay calm under pressure. Her job was to make sure everything went right during their visit. Ji-hoon nodded and smiled at her. "Are you nervous, Minji?" she thought. For a moment. "A little bit, but mostly excited. This is the most important thing humans have ever tried to do." In the communication room, Dong-Yun Lee was checking all the translation equipment one more time. He had worked for months to understand how the Vilthani talked to each other. They did not use words like humans. Instead, they made musical sounds. That meant different things. It was like trying to learn a song that was also a language. "The harmonic translator is working perfectly," Dong-Yun told himself as he ran the final tests. He had built this machine to change human words into Vilthani music and back again. Without it, the two species could never understand each other. Down. In the security section, Yuna Choi was making sure all their gifts were safe and ready. The cargo hold was full of things that showed the best of human culture. There were paintings by famous artists, recordings of beautiful music, and samples of Earth's most amazing foods. There were also books of science and mathematics to show how smart humans could be. Yuna had fought in the border wars against space pirates. She knew how to protect people and things, but this mission was different. They were not going to fight anyone. They were going to try to make peace. Still, she kept her weapons ready, just in case. "All gifts are secure and ready for presentation," she reported to Ji-hoon over the communication system. As the ship got closer to Velth Prime, the crew could see how different this place was from anything humans had ever built. The planet was covered in huge crystal towers that reached up into the sky like mountains made of glass. The towers were all different colors, and they seemed to glow with their own light. Around the planet, strange ships moved in perfect patterns. The Vilthani ships looked like they were made from the same crystal as their buildings. They were beautiful, but also a little scary. Each ship was bigger than anything humans had ever made. "Incoming transmission," Dong-Yun called out. The speakers filled with a sound like wind chimes mixed with whale songs. It was beautiful and strange at the same time. The translation machine worked hard to change the alien music into human words. After a few seconds, a voice spoke. "Unknown visitors, you have entered Vilthani space. State your purpose or be removed." Ji-hoon took a deep breath. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. "This is Ambassador Ji-hoon Park of Earth. We come in peace. We wish to speak with your leaders about friendship between our peoples." There was a long silence. Then the musical sounds came again. "You will follow our ships. Do not try to leave the path we show you. Any wrong move will be seen as an attack." 3 crystal ships appeared around the Harmony's Edge. They were so close that the humans could see light moving inside them like liquid fire. The alien ships began to move toward the planet, and the human ship followed. As they got closer to Velth Prime, the crew could see more details. The crystal towers were not empty. Things were moving inside them, but it was hard to tell what they were. The Vilthani themselves were made of crystal, too, but they moved like living things. "It's incredible," whispered Minji as she watched the alien city grow larger. "They must have been building this for thousands of years." The Harmonies. Edge was brought to a docking station that was carved out of a single huge crystal. As soon as they connected to the station, the temperature inside the ship began to change. The air became filled with soft musical sounds that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The Vilthani want to meet us in 1 hour," Dong-Yun reported, after listening to their instructions. "They are sending guides to bring us to something called the High Resonance Council." Ji-hoon felt his heart beating faster. He had dreamed of this moment for years. Finally, humans would not be alone in the galaxy. They would have friends among the stars. The guides that came for them were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. They were tall and thin, made of clear crystal that sparkled with inner light. When they moved, they made soft musical sounds with each step. Their faces were hard to understand because they did not look like human faces at all. "Welcome, small singers," one of the guides said through the translation machine. "The High Council will hear your voice patterns." The humans gathered their gifts and followed the crystal beings through corridors that seemed to sing as they walked. Everything around them was beautiful, but it also felt cold and strange. The walls were covered with patterns that hurt to look at for too long. As they walked deeper into the alien city, Ji-hoon began to feel that something was not quite right. The Vilthani were polite, but they seemed to be studying the humans very carefully. It felt less like a friendly meeting and more like being examined. But he pushed those worried thoughts away. This was too important to let fear ruin it. Humanity's future among the stars was about to begin. Admiral Soo-hyun Nam walked back and forth across the floor of the Defense Council meeting room. The big screens on the walls showed maps of space, but they could not show him what he really wanted to know. Where was the Harmony's edge? Where was Ambassador Ji-hoon Park and his team? It had been 6 weeks since the last message from the diplomatic mission. 6 weeks of complete silence from the most important mission humanity had ever sent into space. The last transmission had been simple. Arrived safely at Vielth Prime, beginning formal contact procedures. Then nothing. President Hyunwoo Jang sat at the head of the long table, his face showing the worry that everyone in the room felt. Around him sat the most important people in Earth's government and military. They had all been asking the same question for weeks. "What happened to, our people? Admiral Nam, what do our deep space sensors tell us?" President Jang asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good. Soo-hyun stopped walking and looked at the data screens. "The Harmony's edge left its position near Vielth Prime 3 weeks ago. Our long-range tracking shows it moving toward the outer edge of Vilthani space. But we cannot contact the ship. All communication channels are dead." Dr. Yoon-bi Han, the chief scientist who studied alien life, spoke up from her seat. "I have been trying to understand the Vilthani radio signals we can pick up. Most of it is just normal talk between their ships and planets. But there were some strange transmissions right after our ship arrived at their world." She pressed a button and the room filled with the weird musical sounds that the Vilthani used to talk. Even through the speakers, the alien language sounded beautiful and frightening at the same time. "What did they say?" President Jang asked. Dr. Han shook her head. "The translation is not perfect, but it seems to be about new specimens and catalog entries. I thought maybe they were talking about the gifts our people brought. But now I am not sure. General Taehyun." O, who was in charge of Earth's space forces, hit the table with his hand. "We should have sent a military ship with them. I told you it was dangerous to send just one small diplomatic vessel." "The whole point was to show that we came in peace," President Jiang replied. "If we had sent warships, it would have looked like we were planning to attack them." "And look how well that worked out," the general said with anger in his voice. Before anyone could argue more, an aide ran into the room. She was breathing hard, and her face was pale. "Sir, the Harmony's Edge just appeared on our sensors. It's coming back to Earth." Everyone in the room stood up at once. Admiral Nam grabbed the communication device on the table. "Get me a direct link to that ship right now." The aide shook her head. "We tried, sir. There is no answer. The ship is flying on automatic pilot. We are not picking up any life signs." The room became very quiet. President Jiang felt his stomach turn cold. "How long until it gets here?" 2 days, sir." Those 2 days felt like 2 years. The whole world watched as the Harmony's Edge came, closer to Earth. News reporters talked about it every hour. Some people hoped that the crew was just sleeping or that their communication equipment was broken, but most people feared the worst. When the ship finally arrived in Earth's orbit, Captain Jinwoo Seo led a team of soldiers and doctors to board it. They flew their small shuttle to the Harmony's Edge and connected to the main airlock. Everyone watching from Earth held their breath as the boarding team went inside. Captain Seo's voice came over the radio a few minutes later. His words made everyone's blood run cold. "The ship is empty. There are no people here, but we found something else." The boarding team moved through the ship room by room. Everything looked normal at first. The lights were on, the air was clean, and all the equipment was working. But there were no people anywhere. In the diplomatic quarters, they found the first sign of what had happened. Personal things that belonged to the crew were arranged in strange patterns on the tables and beds. Jihoon's jacket was folded in a perfect square. Minji's notebook was open to a page covered with alien symbols. Dongyun's music player was surrounded by small crystal objects that had not been there before. But the worst discovery was in the main meeting room. On the center table sat 4 small crystal containers. Each one was perfectly clear and held something that made Captain Seo feel sick to look at. Inside the containers were small pieces of human tissue, skin, hair, and other things that had once been part of living people. "God help us," whispered one of the soldiers. "What did they do to our people?" Dr. Min-Soo Kang, the medical officer on the boarding team, examined the containers with shaking hands. "These samples were taken while the subjects were still alive. Look at how cleanly they were cut. This was done very carefully, like a science experiment." Captain Seo found one more thing in the ship's main computer room. A single crystal object sat on top of the main control panel. It was beautiful, like a piece of jewelry, but it felt cold and wrong. When they brought the crystal back to Earth, Dr. Han used every machine she had to figure out what it was. After hours of work, she discovered that it was a message storage device. The alien message inside was short and simple, but it changed everything. The translation came out as, "Your offering has been cataloged and archived. The specimens show interesting biological structure. No further contact is required." Dr. Han read the message 3 times before she understood what it really meant. Then she ran to find President Jiang. When she told him what the crystal said, his face became very pale. "They did not see Jihoon and his team as ambassadors," she explained. "They saw them as things to be studied, like animals in a zoo. or bugs under a microscope. Our people went there to make friends, but the Vilthani just wanted to cut them up and look at the pieces. President Jang sat down heavily in his chair. All his hopes for peace and friendship with the aliens were gone. In their place was a cold anger that grew stronger every second. "Call a meeting of the World Council," he said quietly. "Everyone needs to know what happened. And then we need to decide what we are going to do about it." As word spread about what the Vilthani had done, people all over Earth began to feel the same cold anger. The aliens had not just killed 4 humans, they had treated them like laboratory animals. They had cut pieces off of living people and kept them like souvenirs. Humanity had reached out its hand in friendship, and the Vilthani had chopped off the fingers to study them. That night, President Jang could not sleep. He stood at his office, window looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the aliens who had done this terrible thing were continuing their normal lives. They probably thought humans were too weak and stupid to do anything about it. They were about to learn how wrong they were. President Hyunwoo Jong stood in front of the cameras, his hands shaking slightly as he held the speech he had written. Behind him, the flags of every nation on Earth hung side by side. Today, for the first time in human history, the whole world would speak with one voice. "My fellow humans," he began, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. 3 days ago, our diplomatic mission to the Vilthani Empire returned to Earth. Ambassador Jihoon Park, his aide Minji Kim, communications specialist Dong Yun, Lee, and security chief Yuna Choi did not return with it. He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in across the world. In homes and offices, on military bases and space stations, billions of people watched and waited. The Vilthani did not reject our offer of friendship. They did not send our people home with a message of no. Instead, they treated our ambassadors like laboratory animals. They cut pieces from their living bodies to study them. They kept these pieces as specimens in crystal containers. Our people died in alien laboratories, far from home, treated not as intelligent beings, but as interesting biological samples. Around the world, people began to understand what had really happened. In Seoul, Jihoon's sister, Seo-young Park, dropped the cup of coffee she was holding. On the military base where Yuna's family lived, her father, a retired soldier, felt his hands close into fists. The feeling was the same everywhere, a cold, terrible anger that spread like fire. "The message they sent back with our ship was simple," President Jang continued. "They said our people had been cataloged and archived. They told us no further. Contact was required. They treated the murder of our ambassadors like filing away paperwork." He looked directly into the camera, and everyone watching could see the determination in his eyes. The Vilthani made one very big mistake. They thought humans were weak. They thought we would accept this treatment and crawl away to hide. They were wrong. Today, I am declaring that a state of war exists between Earth and the Vilthani Empire. We will not rest until we have justice for our murdered people. Within hours of the president's speech, something amazing happened. The entire human race began to work together like never before. Every factory, every shipyard, every research center on Earth and in the colonies changed what they were doing. Instead of making cars and computers and civilian ships, they began making weapons and warships and military equipment. General Tae-hyun-oh found himself in charge of the biggest military operation humans had ever attempted. In the past, Earth's different nations had their own armies and navies. But now, every soldier, Every ship, every weapon was part of one giant force with one goal: make the Vialthani pay for what they had done. Dr. Seoyoung Park, Jihoon's sister, locked herself in her laboratory and began working 18 hours a day. She was one of Earth's best scientists, and now she had a new job: figure out how to kill crystalline aliens. The Velthani were not made of flesh and blood like humans. They were made of some kind of living crystal that no human had ever seen before. If they are crystals, then they must have structural weaknesses, she told her research team. Every crystal has a frequency that can make it break apart. We just need to find theirs. Day and night, her team worked to understand how the alien bodies worked. They studied the few images that the Harmony's Edge had recorded and tried to figure out what would hurt beings made of living stone. At the same time, engineer Kyungmin An was solving a different problem. Earth's military had weapons designed to fight other humans. Bullets and missiles and energy beams that worked well against ships made of metal and people made of flesh. But would they work against crystal aliens? Kyungmin had an idea. "We do not need to build new weapons," he told the military leaders. "We need to change the weapons we already have. The mining lasers we use to cut through asteroids are much more powerful than our military lasers. The industrial cutting tools we use in factories can slice through anything. We just need to put them on warships instead of mining ships." Across human space, hundreds of civilian ships were brought into military yards to be changed into weapons of war. Mining ships became battleships. Factory equipment became ship-mounted weapons. Even the huge machines used to build space stations were turned into tools for destroying alien cities. But the most important discovery came from a young naval officer named Sunwoo Lim. He was studying the recordings of Velthani communications when he noticed something strange. Their ships all talked to each other at the same time, he explained to Admiral Nam. "It is like they are singing together in a giant choir. All their voices are perfectly matched, perfectly timed. If something happened to disrupt that singing, their whole fleet might fall apart." Admiral Nam understood immediately. "You are saying they are too connected to each other. If we can break their communication, we can break their coordination." "Exactly, sir. And I think I know how to do it." Sunwoo had been a music student before he joined the Navy. He understood how sounds worked, how they could interfere with each other. If the Vialthani used harmonic frequencies to coordinate their fleets, then humans could use those same frequencies to turn their coordination into chaos. While Earth prepared for war, intelligence reports began coming in from the border regions. The news was bad, but it also made humans more determined to fight. The Velthani had not just murdered the diplomatic mission. They had been doing the same thing to other species for hundreds of years. Dr. Yunbi Han managed to decode more alien transmissions, and what she found made everyone sick with rage. The Velthani had museum worlds where they kept the remains of 17 different intelligent species. Each one had approached them for trade or peace. Each one had been catalogued and archived. "They are not warriors," Dr. Han reported to the War Council. "They are collectors. They find species that are smart enough to be interesting, and then they take them apart to see how they work. Our ambassadors were not the first. They were just the latest." This news reached every human settlement in space. On the mining colonies, workers welded armor plating onto cargo ships and turned them into improvised warships. On the research stations, scientists worked to turn their laboratory equipment into weapons. Even on the farming worlds, people began growing food and making supplies for the coming war. But perhaps the most important change was in how humans thought about themselves. For the first time in their history, they truly felt like one people. It did not matter what country someone came from, what language they spoke, or what they looked like. They were all human, and other humans had been murdered by aliens who saw them as nothing more than interesting specimens. Captain Bora Kang, who commanded a destroyer in the Outer Fleet, spoke for millions of people when she recorded a message for her family. I used to think humans were too violent, too quick to fight. But now I understand. Sometimes there are things so evil that the only right response is to destroy them completely. The Valtani think we are just another species to be collected and studied. We are going to show them exactly what happens when you treat humans like laboratory animals. As the months passed, the human fleet grew larger than anyone had thought possible. Every shipyard worked day and night. Every factory produced weapons and armor and ammunition. Every person on Earth and in the colonies contributed something to the war effort. The Valtani had made their biggest mistake when they decided to treat humanity's greatest diplomatic effort as a specimen collection opportunity. They thought humans were weak because they came in peace. They thought humans were stupid because they offered friendship. They were about to learn that humans were neither weak nor stupid. They were about to learn that some species should never be provoked, and that cutting up a human ambassador was the best way to turn an entire civilization into their worst enemy. Admiral Soo-Hyun Nam stood on the bridge of the battleship Earth's Fury and watched as the largest military force in human history moved through space toward the Valtani border. Behind her ship flew 300 warships of every size and type. Mining vessels covered in armor plating sailed next to military destroyers. Converted cargo haulers bristling with weapons flew alongside sleek fighters. Every ship carried the same message painted on its hull in bright letters. Remember the Harmony's Edge. They had been traveling for 2 months, and now they were finally entering Valtani space. Unlike the diplomatic mission that had announced itself and asked for permission, the human fleet simply crossed the border and began their work. There were no messages asking for surrender, no demands for negotiation. The time for talking was over. First target is the research station at Kepler 442, reported Captain Jinwoo Seo from the tactical station. Intelligence says it is one of their specimen collection facilities. Admiral Nam nodded grimly. Begin the attack. I want that station completely destroyed. Leave nothing standing. The human fleet spread out as it approached the Valtani research station. The station was beautiful, like everything the aliens built. A huge crystal structure that sparkled with rainbow colors as it turned slowly in space. But the humans no longer cared about alien beauty. They had learned what horrors were hidden inside those pretty crystal walls. Captain Bora Kang led the first attack group in her destroyer Justice's Edge. As they got closer to the station, she could see Valtani ships moving to defend it. The alien vessels were graceful and elegant, shaped like musical instruments made of living crystal. They moved in perfect formation, their harmonic communication keeping them coordinated like dancers in a ballet. Sun Woo, are you ready with the frequency disruptors? Captain Kang asked. Officer Sun Woo Lim, now promoted to lieutenant, sat at his special equipment station. For months he had worked to perfect his harmonic disruption system. Now it was time to see if his theory was correct. Disruption. Field ready, Captain. Targeting their coordination frequency. Fire. The invisible wave of harmonic interference spread out from the human ships toward the Valtani fleet. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The alien ships continued their elegant dance through space, moving toward the human vessels with deadly grace. Then the disruption field reached them. Suddenly, the perfect coordination of the Valtani fleet fell apart. Ships that had been moving in perfect harmony began to crash into each other. Their harmonic communication became a chaotic noise that left them confused and unable to work together. Some of the crystal ships began to vibrate so violently that cracks appeared in their hulls. "It works!" shouted Sunwoo with excitement. "Their entire fleet coordination depends on harmonic resonance. When we disrupt that, they cannot function as a unit." Captain Kang smiled grimly and gave the order her crew had been waiting for. "All ships, open fire. Show them what happens when you murder human diplomats." The human weapons had been designed for mining and industrial work, but they were devastatingly effective against crystal targets. High-powered cutting lasers sliced through alien hulls like hot knives through ice. Industrial grinders, mounted on the front of converted mining ships, turned elegant Valthani vessels into clouds of crystal dust. But the most terrifying weapons were the new resonance bombs that engineer Daeho Yoon had developed. When these weapons exploded near a crystal structure, they sent out waves of precisely tuned vibration that found the natural frequency of the alien materials. The results were spectacular and horrible. Entire Valthani ships would suddenly begin to sing a high, pure note and then shatter into millions of pieces like wine glasses hit by an opera singer. The research station itself lasted less than an hour under the human assault. As the outer defenses crumbled, boarding teams led by security specialists like Major Hwanwoong Ryu entered the station to see what the Valthani had been doing inside. What they found made even hardened soldiers sick to their stomachs. The station was not just a research facility. It was a museum of horror. Room after room was filled with glass cases containing the preserved remains of dozens of different alien species. Whole sections were dedicated to the study of living beings, operating tables where creatures had been cut apart while still alive, storage tanks where body parts floated in preservation fluid, laboratories where alien scientists had experimented on captured prisoners. "Captain," Major Ryu reported over the radio, his voice shaking with rage, "you need to see this. They have thousands of specimens here, not just from the diplomatic mission, but from dozens of other species. This whole station is basically a giant torture chamber disguised as a science facility. In one section, they found what they had been looking for: the remains of Ambassador Ji-hoon Park and his team. The aliens had not just killed them quickly and taken samples. They had kept them alive for weeks, slowly removing pieces to study how human biology worked. The records showed every detail of their suffering. Captain Bora Kang had to leave the bridge when she heard the reports from the boarding teams. She found herself in the ship's bathroom, throwing up as she thought about what had been done to her fellow humans. When she came back, her face was pale, but her eyes burned with cold fury. "Destroy everything," she ordered. "I want this place wiped from existence. Use the resonance bombs. Turn it all to dust." The destruction of the research station was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, the human fleet moved through Valthani space like a storm of vengeance. Every military base was destroyed. Every research facility was reduced to rubble. Every museum world where the aliens kept their collections of murdered species was bombed until nothing remained but floating debris. The Valthani tried to fight back, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Other species had approached them one at a time, usually as refugees or desperate survivors seeking help. They had been easy to capture and study. But humans came as a unified force with superior numbers and weapons specifically designed to exploit Valthani weaknesses. At the Battle of the Shattered Rings, Admiral Nam faced the main Valthani defense fleet. 300 alien ships moved in their traditional harmonious formation, confident that their superior technology and coordination would defeat the primitive humans. They had not counted on Lieutenant Sunwoo Lim's frequency disruptors. As soon as the Vialthani fleet came within range, every human ship activated its harmonic interference system. The beautiful alien formation immediately broke apart as their communication became chaos. Crystal ships crashed into each other, their crews unable to coordinate their movements. But the humans had learned to do more than just disrupt Valthani coordination. Dr. Seo-Young Park's research had revealed the exact resonance frequency that could shatter Valthani crystal structures. Engineer Daeho Yoon had built weapons that could broadcast that frequency with devastating effect. The result was not a battle. It was an execution. One by one, the Valthani ships began to sing their death songs as the resonance weapons found their structural weak points. The elegant crystal vessels that had seemed so beautiful and advanced turned out to be incredibly fragile when attacked by someone who understood their nature. "Sir," reported Captain Seo as the last alien ship broke apart, "the enemy fleet has been completely destroyed. No survivors." Admiral Nam felt no joy in the victory. This was not about conquest or glory. This was about justice for the murdered members of humanity's first diplomatic mission. Every dead Valthani was a small payment on the debt they owed for treating human beings like laboratory specimens. But as the human fleet moved deeper into alien space, some officers began to worry about what they were becoming. The Vialthani had been cruel and evil, but the human response was utterly ruthless. Every alien facility was destroyed completely. No prisoners were taken. No mercy was shown. Captain Min Yuk Yu, commanding the cruiser Righteous Anger, spoke for many when he recorded a message to his family. "I wonder sometimes if we are becoming as bad as they are. We came here for justice, but what we are doing feels more like revenge. Still, when I think about what they did to Ambassador Park and his team, I know we cannot stop. Some things are so evil that they must be completely destroyed no matter what it costs us." As the human fleet approached Vialth Prime, the capital world of the alien empire, long-range sensors detected something that made everyone stop and think. The planet was not just defended by military forces. It was covered with huge crystal structures that appeared to be museums and research facilities on a massive scale. Dr. Onbi Han, who had joined the fleet to study captured Valthani technology, made a discovery that changed everything. "Admiral," she reported, "those structures on Valth Prime are not just buildings. They are the largest collection of preserved specimens in the galaxy. According to the alien records we captured, they have samples from over 200 different intelligent species stored there." Admiral Nam understood what this meant. Valth Prime was not just the alien capital. It was the tomb of civilizations. Hundreds of species that had reached out in friendship to the Vialthani were buried there, their remains preserved as trophies of alien scientific curiosity. "Prepare for final assault," she ordered. "We are going to liberate every soul they have imprisoned." Valth Prime hung in space before the human fleet like a crystal jewel covered in cancer. The beautiful planet sparkled with rainbow colors. But Admiral Soo-hyun Nam knew that its beauty hid the greatest collection of horrors in the galaxy. Every pretty crystal tower on its surface was built from the bones of murdered civilizations. The final battle began at dawn on the planet's main continent. Instead of one massive assault, Admiral Nam had chosen to land troops in 100 different places at once. She wanted to capture as many of the museum facilities as possible before the Vialthani could destroy the evidence of their crimes. Captain Bora Kang led the first landing force toward the largest crystal city on the planet. As her shuttle broke through the atmosphere, she could see the true scale of what the aliens had built. The towers were not just tall, they were huge beyond imagination, stretching up into the clouds like glass mountains. Each one was bigger than the largest city on Earth. "Landing zone is hot," reported her pilot as alien defense systems began firing at them. Multiple crystal fighters incoming, but the Valthani defenses were already breaking down. Lieutenant Sun Wu Lim's frequency disruptors were being broadcast from orbit, turning the aliens' coordinated defense into chaos. Crystal fighters crashed into their own buildings as their harmonic communication became noise. The landing was rough, but Captain Kang's troops made it to the ground safely. Around them, the crystal city sang with a deep, mournful sound as the human frequency weapons slowly tore it apart. But before the buildings could collapse completely, the soldiers had to get inside and see what secrets they held. What they found inside the first tower made seasoned warriors stop and stare in shock. The building was not just a museum. It was a tomb that reached from the ground to the clouds. Floor after floor was filled with display cases containing the preserved remains of intelligent beings from across the galaxy. Each case had a small crystal plaque that told the story of the species inside. When they had come to the Valthani seeking friendship, how they had been captured, what experiments had been performed on them before they died. "This is impossible," whispered Sergeant Kye-hyun-no as he looked at a case containing what appeared to be a family of blue-skinned humanoids. "There must be millions of specimens in this building alone. How many species did they murder?" Major Hwan Wung Ryu was examining the crystal plaques with growing horror. According to these records, the Valthani have been doing this for over 3,000 years. Every intelligent species that made contact with them ended up here. Floor by floor, the human soldiers climbed through the Tower of the Dead. Each level showed them new horrors, new evidence of systematic murder disguised as scientific research. There were creatures that looked almost human, others that were so alien they were hard to understand, but all of them shared the same story. They had come in peace and been butchered for the aliens' curiosity. On the highest floor of the tower, they found something that made everyone stop in rage and sadness. In a special section marked as Recent Acquisitions were 4 crystal cases containing the carefully preserved remains of Ambassador Ji-hoon Park, Min-ji Kim, Dong-yun Lee, and Yuna Choi. The plaques beside their cases described them as specimens from recently contacted species 247, notable for primitive but effective space travel technology and complex social organization. Captain Kang felt tears running down her face as she looked at what was left of the brave people who had tried to make humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. They had been reduced to museum pieces, their sacrifice turned into a tourist attraction for alien visitors. "Sir," one of her soldiers said quietly, "there are more levels below ground. The whole planet appears to be hollow, filled with these storage facilities." As human forces secured more of the planet, the true scope of Valthani evil became clear. Valt Prime was not just their capital, it was the largest cemetery in the galaxy. Billions of preserved specimens from hundreds of different species were stored in underground vaults that went down for miles beneath the surface. The entire planet was a monument to systematic genocide disguised as scientific collection, but in the deepest levels, Dr. Seo-young Park made a discovery that changed everything. Working with captured Valthani technology, she found that some of the preservation methods used by the aliens were more advanced than anyone had realized. "Admiral," she reported over the communication system, "I think some of these specimens might be recoverable. The Vilethani preservation technology does not just store dead tissue. It maintains neural patterns and cellular structure. With the right equipment, we might be able to restore some of these beings to life. The thought that they might be able to bring back some of the murdered species, including their own people, made the human forces fight even harder. But it also created a terrible dilemma. To use the resurrection technology, they would need to keep the Vilethani alive to operate it. The same aliens who had committed these horrors would be needed to undo them. In the center of the capital city, Admiral Nam finally came face to face with the rulers of the Vilethani Empire. The High Resonance Council had gathered in their most sacred building, a crystal spire that reached higher than any mountain on Earth. As human forces surrounded the building, the alien leaders finally understood that their civilization was about to end. The Vilethani who emerged from the spire to meet the humans were different from the lower-ranked aliens they had fought. These beings were older, larger, and their crystal bodies were covered with complex patterns that showed their high status. When they spoke, their harmonic voices were deeper and more complex than any the humans had heard before. "We offer terms," the lead Vilethani said through the translation systems. "Knowledge, technology, the locations of other surviving species. Name your price for allowing our civilization to continue." Admiral Nam looked at the alien leader with cold eyes. "You think this is about conquest? About taking your territory or your technology? You still do not understand what you did." She gestured toward the towers of the dead that surrounded them. "You murdered our ambassadors. You treated them like laboratory animals. You have been doing the same thing to other species for thousands of years. This is not about territory or resources. This is about justice." The Vilethani leader's crystal form flickered with confusion. "We preserved them. We studied them. We learned from them. Their deaths contributed to the growth of knowledge. This is how we have always interacted with lesser species." "Lesser species," Admiral Nam repeated slowly. "You see us as lesser species." "Of course. You are young, primitive, violent. We are ancient, advanced, peaceful. It is natural that we should study you." Admiral Nam felt the cold anger that had driven humanity across the galaxy burning brighter than ever. Even now, faced with the destruction of their civilization, the Vilethani could not understand that they had done anything wrong. They truly believed that their superior technology gave them the right to murder and study any species they encountered. "Dr. Park," Admiral Nam said into her communication device, "how much Vilethani technical support do we need to operate their resurrection technology?" Dr. Seo-Young Park's voice came back immediately. "I have been studying their equipment for, weeks. I believe I can operate it with minimal alien assistance, perhaps a dozen technicians to help with the most complex procedures." Admiral Nam nodded and turned back to the Vilethani leader. "Here are my terms. Your military is destroyed. Your government is ended. Your empire is finished. But we will allow a small number of your people to survive, under human supervision, to help us restore the beings you murdered. You will spend the rest of your existence trying to undo the evil you have done." The alien leader's crystal form darkened with what might have been anger. "You cannot destroy us. We are the preservers of knowledge. We are the guardians of galactic history." "You are murderers," Admiral Nam replied simply, "and murderers do not get to decide their own punishment." The final assault on the Vilethani capital lasted 3 days. Human forces swept through every building, every underground vault, every research facility. The aliens fought desperately, but their harmonious coordination had been completely broken by the frequency disruptors. Individual Valthani were no match for human soldiers trained for combat. When it was over, the Valthani Empire that had ruled 17 star systems for thousands of years was gone. Most of their population was dead. Their fleets were destroyed. Their planets were occupied by human forces. But in the laboratories beneath Valth Prime, Dr. Seo-Young Park began the slow process of bringing the dead back to life. With the help of captured Valthani technicians working under heavy guard, she started with the most recent specimens, the crew of the Harmony's Edge. The process was difficult and painful. The preserved neural patterns had to be carefully restored to cloned bodies grown from the tissue samples. It took months of work, and many attempts failed. But slowly, impossibly, the dead began to return. Ambassador Ji-hoon Park was the first to open his eyes in a human medical facility. He was confused and frightened with no memory of his death, but clear memories of being captured and experimented on by the aliens. When he learned what had happened, how humanity had crossed the galaxy to avenge his murder, he wept for both grief and pride.